You may have seen in some Paper Mario the Origami King videos that if you use a Pow Block to finish the Boss Sumo Bros, that the game ends up being stuck like this. You have Mario stuck in the air, the music keeps playing, and the toads in the background keep speaking. So this got me thinking, let's try to defeat every boss with the Pow Block and let's see what happens. So we'll go in order. And we run into a problem right from the first two bosses. If we try to face the Earth Vellumental boss or the Colored Pencils boss, if we do that in the Battle Lab, and we look at our items, we're not given a Pow Block. And I don't think that there's anywhere in the world up until this point of the game that you are able to get a Pow Block. So we'll only be able to start using Pow Blocks on bosses starting from the third boss. So the first boss that we can use the Pow Block on is the Water Vellumental boss. And we have two issues here. First of all, we can't attack the Water Vellumental while it's flying, so we'll have to either jump on it and bring it down to the ground and then use a Pow Block on it, or we'll have to wait until it uses its special attack and then use the Pow Block on it. And the second problem we have with the Water Vellumental is that the Pow Block does only 1 damage on the Water Vellumental. So if we do too much damage onto the Water Vellumental, then we'll accidentally defeat it, and we won't be able to test out if we can defeat this boss with a Pow Block. So after several attempts of trying to get down the Water Vellumental to exactly 1 HP, I used the Pow Block on the Water Vellumental when it was at 1 HP, and the Pow Block does work successfully, which is fantastic. So far, this is going great. Next, we'll face the Rubber Band boss, and this is a bit of an interesting boss because of the way that the boss's HP works. When you damage this boss with something other than the 1000-fold arm attack, you'll knock out some of its rubber bands, but then it'll just call back its rubber bands and heal in the next turn. So I tried everything that I could using all kinds of items, not just the Pow Block, using different kinds of attacks, trying to see if we could damage the boss and get it into phase 2 with something other than a 1000-fold arm attack, but only the 1000-fold arm attack will be able to deal that damaging blow that gets the boss into phase 2 of the fight. And once we're in phase 2 of the fight, the only thing that can defeat it here is a 1000-fold arm attack. None of the items, no other attacks will be able to damage or defeat the boss. So the Rubber Band boss, we can't defeat with a Pow Block. The Fire Vellumental is an interesting one, and those of you that have seen my previous video on can we defeat the Fire Vellumental without attacking it, we go into this question a lot more in depth, and we see that with the Pow Block, no, you cannot defeat the Fire Vellumental. You can't knock out the last few of the Fire Vellumental's feathers without using the 1000-fold arm attack. Next, we'll be testing the Hole Punch boss, and on a lot of bosses, the Pow Block does 1 damage, but when we try to use the Pow Block on the Hole Punch, it does 0 damage. Even if we use the Earth Vellumental special when the Hole Punch is about to use its special attack, and then it gets flipped upside down and it's vulnerable, still, even at this point, the Pow Block does 0 damage. So no, we cannot defeat the Hole Punch boss with a Pow Block because we can't even damage the Hole Punch boss with the Pow Block. Next, we'll face the Ice Vellumental, and I tried to get the Ice Vellumental's HP really low to see if I could finish it off with a Pow Block. Normally, you can finish off this boss with either the 1000-fold arm attack or using a Fire Flower, but if you use a Pow Block here, it doesn't do any damage, so we can't finish off the Ice Vellumental with a Pow Block. The next boss that we'll be facing is Tape. Normally, in the first phase of facing Tape, a Fire Flower is very effective at destroying the case of the tape, so I thought, maybe the Pow Block will be more effective because it'll be able to attack all 4 corners of the case. But the Pow Block ends up doing nothing in phase 1, and once we get to phase 2 of the fight, the Pow Block also doesn't do anything, so we can't damage the tape boss with the Pow Block. Next, I was very surprised at what happened when testing out what the Pow Block does to the Boss Sumo Bros, because in other clips that I've seen of the Pow Block being used on the Boss Sumo Bros, it crashes the game or soft blocks the game, and I wasn't able to replicate this. Every time that I used the Pow Block on the Boss Sumo Bros, it worked as it should have, and the game didn't crash, and I was able to continue. Whether I use the Pow Block at the start of the fight, or whether I use the Pow Block to finish off the boss, either way it worked fine for me, so I'm not sure why that is. Next is the Handaconda boss, and at first I didn't think that this would be able to work because if you use a Fire Flower or if you use an Ice Flower, the Handaconda just swats away the fireballs and ice balls that are coming towards it, so you can't use those items to damage it. But if you use a Pow Block, it does do a very small amount of damage to the Handaconda. So I was thinking, will we be able to use a Pow Block instead of a hammer attack to make Olivia pop out. And it turns out, yes, you can. If you do the right amount of damage earlier in the fight, and then you use a Pow Block, then you could have Olivia pop out and go to phase 2 of the fight. Unfortunately, in phase 2 of the fight, there are no attack panels. There's only a rock, paper, and scissors panel, so we can't test out what using the Pow Block would do here because we don't have access to our items in phase 2 of the fight. Scissors was probably the most difficult boss to test this for. I learned early on that we could use the Pow Block to damage the case of the scissors, and that does a small amount of damage, so I wanted to test and see if we could actually defeat the scissors boss with a Pow Block. With some very careful planning of what types of attacks to use to try to get the scissors boss down to exactly 1 HP, I ended up dealing 334 damage exactly to the scissors boss, and then I went to use the Pow Block to deal 1 more HP for a grand total of 335, expecting that this would defeat the boss. But the boss was still alive after 335 damage. So let's try this again, but let's try dealing 335 damage and dealing 1 more damage with the Pow Block. It seems like a weird number of HP to give a boss. Why would you give a boss 336 HP and not 335? But let's try it. So with a newly planned strategy, I ended up dealing exactly 335 damage to the scissors boss, and then we used the Pow Block to deal the final 1 damage, and it turns out that this boss ended up having exactly 336 HP. So yes, you can use the Pow Block to defeat the scissors boss, and the scissors boss has exactly 336 HP. The stapler boss was another difficult fight for testing out if it's possible to defeat it with a Pow Block. At the start of the fight, if you try using a Pow Block on it while the stapler isn't open and reloading, then the Pow Block will do 0 damage, which might be a bit discouraging at first, and you might think, okay, it looks like we're not able to damage the stapler with a Pow Block. But, big but. You might remember from the fight that after the stapler uses its special attack, it opens up to reload on more staples, and during this time, the stapler is vulnerable and it has a much lower defense, and you can deal much more damage normally on the stapler once it's open like this. So what happens if we use the Pow Block while the stapler is reloading like this? Well, what ends up happening is that yes, the Pow Block does deal some damage. The Pow Block deals 1 damage when the stapler is open and reloading. So with some very carefully planned turns, very precise damage, dealing exactly 349 damage, dealing enough damage to the stapler to knock out enough of the golden staples to be able to survive the fight. If the stapler is reloading when it has just 1 HP left, then we are able to use the Pow Block to defeat the stapler. And finally, King Olly might be what you expect after seeing the Vellumental battles. Using the Pow Block doesn't damage any of the Vellumentals, and your regular attacks also don't damage the Vellumentals. You have to use the Vellumental's weakness and the 1000-fold arm technique in order to damage the Vellumentals that King Olly transforms into. There are more Paper Mario the Origami King videos on my YouTube channel, so I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe if you enjoyed this video. You could take a look at more videos where we take a look at boss mechanics like we do in this one here, or there are videos where we take an in-depth look at analyzing characters and what makes a character in a game great, and there are also memes if you feel like watching something to make you laugh. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have a lovely day and take care. If we don't take him out this turn, then he'll probably heal. And we got him. We got him. Oh my god. Oh my god, can you believe that?